David wasn't just a king in a crown. He was a fugitive, a poet, a sinner, and a warrior. His life wasn't neat or polished. It was raw, flawed, and unforgettable. David, the shepherd boy who became Israel's king, is one of those rare figures in human history whose life feels more like literature than biography, more like a poem carved into stone than a dusty chronicle written in ink. Who was David in the Bible? He was the boy with a sling, the man with a harp, the fugitive in the wilderness, the warrior with blood on his hands, the king robed in glory, the sinner crushed beneath his own desire, the poet who prayed like his bones were on fire, the flawed yet favored man after God's own heart. To encounter him is to stare into the paradox of power and weakness, of holiness and hunger, of divinely anointed greatness colliding with all too human frailty. David enters the biblical stage quietly, almost absurdly, tucked among the sheepfolds of Bethlehem. The youngest son of Jesse, overlooked by his own father when the prophet Samuel came to anoint a king, David is the embodiment of God's disruptive choice. A boy too small for armor, too young for the battlefield, too ordinary to command the eye. And yet, as so often happens in the scriptures, God delights in the unexpected, in the hidden, in the one no one else considers. The boy who strums lyres for livestock will soon play melodies that move monarchs, and the hand that once fought off lions will hurl a stone that topples giants. The story of David and Goliath has become cultural shorthand for the unlikely underdog who stares down the impossible. But to flatten it into mere motivational metaphor is to strip it of its electric essence. For David was not simply brave. He was brazen with belief. He looked at the giant not as an obstacle but as an insult to the living God. His weapon was not precision but audacity. Faith forged in solitude, in silence, in the obscure spaces where no one was watching. This is the first mark of David. His greatness begins not on the battlefield, but in the wilderness, in the hidden places where he sang psalms to an unseen audience of sheep and stars. Yet David's ascent is not a clean climb. He is hunted by Saul, the paranoid king he once soothed with song. He lives in caves, clings to cliffs, feigns madness before enemies, gathers to himself the desperate, the indebted, the discontented, men who would become his mighty warriors. His story is raw, nomadic, almost cinematic, as if a fugitive folk hero is being forged out of fire and hunger. Here is the paradox again. David is chosen but not yet crowned, anointed but not enthroned. He is both king and outlaw, saint and scoundrel, already and not yet. When he finally ascends the throne, David's reign glimmers with grandeur. He unites tribes, defeats enemies, establishes Jerusalem as his capital, and dances before the Ark of the Covenant with wild abandon, scandalizing his own wife with a joy too unrestrained for royal dignity. He is at once regal and reckless, priestly and profane, weaving worship into warfare, fusing politics with poetry. He pens psalms that ache with intimacy, words that still bleed across centuries, songs of anguish, songs of ecstasy, laments that claw the heavens and praises that rise like incense. His voice becomes humanity's voice, raw, repentant, radiant. And yet, for all his triumphs, David is undone not by armies but by appetite. His gaze falls on Bathsheba, and with a single act of lust and deceit, the man after God's heart becomes the man under God's judgment. It is here, perhaps more than anywhere, that David feels most modern, most familiar, most uncomfortably like us. For he is not a spotless saint preserved in stained glass. He is a man who breaks under the weight of his own desires. The king who once defied giants now collapses before himself. And still, in his collapse, he writes Psalm 51, a cry so searing, so guttural, that it has become the anthem of every broken soul who has ever begged for mercy. What makes David unforgettable is not his perfection but his paradox. He is a warrior who weeps, a ruler who repents, a sinner who still sings. He is both the architect of empire and the author of confession. He embodies the tension at the heart of the human condition, that we are capable of both staggering faith and shattering failure. And it is in that tension that God works, not by erasing David's flaws, but by weaving them into a larger story of grace. David's legacy is immense. He is remembered as Israel's greatest king, the founder of a dynasty that will carry through centuries, culminating in the claim that Jesus himself is the son of David. His name becomes shorthand for covenant, promise, messianic hope. His psalms echo through liturgies, funerals, monasteries, and midnight cries of the lonely. His life becomes the archetype of flawed faithfulness, a mirror held up to our own trembling pursuit of God. To ask who David was in the Bible is to ask who we are in our own wildernesses. He was a shepherd who became a sovereign, a poet who became a politician, a sinner who became a symbol. He was the man who teaches us that God does not choose the flawless, but the faithful, not the mighty, but the malleable, not the perfect, but the penitent. He shows us that true strength is not found in unbroken records of virtue, but in returning again and again to the God whose mercy outlasts our mess. David is a figure you cannot reduce, cannot sanitize, cannot contain. He is too raw, too contradictory, too alive. He is the sling and the sword, the harp and the hymn, the crown and the confession. He is a reminder that faith is not a straight line but a jagged path of failure and fire, beauty and brutality, where the only constant is the God who walks beside us through it all. So who was David? He was us, magnified, mythologized, mirrored back across millennia. And in his story we see both the peril and the promise of what it means to be human under heaven. Fragile as flesh, fierce as faith, flawed yet favored. A king of contradictions, whose life was less a monument and more a melody. Unfinished, uncontainable, unforgettable. If David's story stirred something in you, step into faith mode. Explore bold Christian streetwear, resources, and inspiration at faithmode.com.